A gute Woche. Rabbi Zilgesund began the Farbrengen today, continuation to Yutes Kislev. This Shabbos has a very obvious shaykhs to Yutes Kislev. In fact, there were many times when the Rabbeim, the previous Rabbeim, Rabbi Seinu Nisiyenu, would Farbrengen on this Shabbos, and the Maimah that they would say on this Shabbos would be a Maimah that has a shaykhs to Yutes Kislev, and as well as the sichas which they would discuss on this Shabbos would also be in Yonim. The contents of the sichas would be such that it has a relation to Yutes Kislev. Though, right away at it, there are many minhagim of the Rabbeim, many customs of the Rabbeim which are not known to us. Of those that are known, it is probably a small amount of their customs and their minhagim that are known to us. Just like we find in the Sedras which we are reading now. We're reading now in the Sedras about the Ovis. Yitzchak lived the longest of the Ovis. Yaakov lived the least of the Ovis. If we look through Chumash, we will see that regarding Yitzchak, the Torah tells us the least. The Torah elaborates more and tells us more about Avraham, and yet more about Yaakov, who lived less than Avraham and Yitzchak. What is this? What is he trying to bring out of this? That a lot of times there are a lot of inyanim which are just not revealed to us. Just like regarding Yitzchak, we know very little. The same regarding the customs of the Rabbeim, we don't know all of them in Hagim, all of the customs of Rabbi Seinu Nisiyenu. But this is known to us, how they acted regarding them. Yutes Kislev would come out on a Thursday. The Shabbos would be following Yutes Kislev. That the Farbrengen and the Sichas and the Mamorim of the specific Shabbos all have a shaykhs to Yutes Kislev. Furthermore, it is even known of there were certain years that in such a kviyas, in other words, when it was such a calendar arrangement that Yutes Kislev came out on a Thursday, that the Yutes Kislev Farbrengen would be on Shabbos night, on Mitzvah Shabbos. So it shows how this Shabbos has a shaykhs to Yutes Kislev. Yutes Kislev was just this past Thursday, as we would call it, the days of Kamei Shabbato, the days of before Shabbos. Not only that, but Yutes Kislev, we know we celebrate the afternoon of Yutes Kislev and the night of Yutes Kislev, so it's extended into the night. In other words, Thursday night is already extended into Friday. What is Friday? Friday is already Erev Shabbos. So Yutes Kislev has a shaykhs to Shabbos because it's right away the day before, which is still part of Yutes Kislev. The same regarding the days after Shabbos. Regarding the days after Shabbos, we know that the first 3 days of the week have a shaykhs to Shabbos. In Halacha, it's brought that if somebody wasn't Mavir Sedra, didn't review the Sedra, as we should do Friday afternoon or Shabbos, twice every pasuk and once every pasuk of Targum, he still has a chance to do it until Tuesday. What we derive from this is that until Tuesday we still have a shaykhs to Shabbos. So the Rebbe says, let us use out the shaykhs of Shabbos until Tuesday, but not by neglecting to be Mavis Sedra. The Mavis Sedra we should do on time. But let us use it out to the fact that these days still have a very strong relation to Shabbos. That means we are bringing in the Shabbos into these days of the week, the Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And particularly as it's this year. So Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday still has a shaykhs to Shabbos. That means it's all an extension of Yutes Kislev. Comes Wednesday, is already Chanukah. So we are going from Yutes Kislev straight into Chanukah. What is the general union of Yutes Kislev? In terms of a lesson of a hero, what is demanded from us? What do we have to increase our doings as of Yutes Kislev? So the Rebbe continues, as of Yutes Kislev, we have to increase our efforts in Hafatza, in spreading Chassidus. This is what Yutes Kislev is all about, the union of spreading Chassidus. To see to it that Chassidus should reach all over. We know that the Rabbeim said their Torahs, their Mamorim, as well as their Sichas, they said it all in Yiddish. As the Alter Rebbe writes in the Geras HaKodesh regarding the Baal Shem Tov, that the Baal Shem Tov spoke in Yiddish. So what we know from this is there is Lashon HaKodesh. Then we know there is Aramaic, which is close and similar to Lashon HaKodesh. And that is why Gemara, Talmud Bavli, and parts of Talmud Yerushalmi are all in the language of Aramaic. Then there is other languages. Regarding the other languages, Chassidus was not said or spoken in other languages until the Frierdiker Rebbe was the one that introduced the concept of spreading Chassidus to such an extent, even translating it into other languages, translating it into German and translating it into Russian, and then later all other languages. Loshen Amza, and a Loshen of a strange language. Here the Rebbe mentioned it's related that the brother of the Rebbe Rashab once translated a Maimer into Russian. The Rebbe says he doesn't know whether this was done while the Rebbe Marash was still alive or after the Rebbe Marash passed away. He translated a Maimer in Russian and he sent it away to somebody, obviously to a goy who understood it in Russian and did not understand it in its original text. But the Rebbe says we do not know, it has not been spoken about this for some reason. This Inyan is not spoken about. It was never repeated, stressed too much, and we really don't know what was the outcome, what was the result of sending away this Maimer, or if it had any results and so forth. So in other words, when did it really begin to spread Chassidus in other languages? The one who really began this was the Frierdiker Rebbe. This is really the inyan of Afatzas HaMayonos, to reach out to those who as yet are not understanding Yiddish and are not familiar to understand it in the original language the way the Rabbeim speak it, and therefore to reach out to them, the Frierdiker Rebbe instituted the idea of translating Chassidus in all other languages. Here the Rebbe commented, the reason he says he speaks in Yiddish, he says is very simple, because this is Yiddish. There's an expression Mameloshen. This is like the his mother tongue, so it's easier for him to speak in Yiddish than to speak in any other language. Talking about this inyan, the Rebbe says, in talking about this, we will also mention that now, in other words, nowadays, it has become the attitude, the hanhaga, the conduct of even Spitz Chabad, those who consider themselves Tapen Chabad, that when they converse amongst themselves, they also speak in English. And they speak in English even when they are speaking in Yonim Chassidus. In Yonim which are deep in Yonim Chassidus, so regarding the particular expressions which are negaya the inyan they are discussing, this they repeat in its original expression. However, their conversation in general, the flow of the conversation is a conversation in English. In other words, the Rebbe was trying to bring out how in today's day and age we have reached a point where even those who consider themselves Spitz Chabad and have received the Chassidische Chinuch and were brought up in Chassidische Meistes, and the language amongst them is also the language of English. Talking about this, kind of, he said, he's not getting into whether this is the right way to do it or this is not the right way to do it. Imtim Saloima. Imtim Saloima is an expression in Hebrew. In other words, if you want to say it is the right way to do it, or perhaps it's something which is debatable, but regarding our point, we see that today Chassidus is spread and Chassidus is spoken in all languages. Not only in its original, not only in Lashon HaKodesh or in Yiddish, but in every language, and especially to those who as yet are not understanding Yiddish. It is our responsibility, or Lashon HaKodesh, it is our responsibility to make sure that we reach out to them, that they will understand, and bring them in Yonim Chassidus, so that they should be able to understand it on the language which they are familiar with right now. And again, the Rebbe stressed the importance of Afatzas HaMayonos, spreading Chassidus, and in all languages, especially to those who do not understand Chassidus in its original language, the way it is said and the way it is written. And most particular, opportune time is to utilize, now that we are Shabbos, and it's a Shabbos which comes in continuation to Yotes Kislev, that we shall accept upon ourselves decisions to bring them down into reality, and should be such type of decisions which should lead towards the spreading of Chassidus. Here the Rebbe brought the expression which we find regarding Chanukah, that what was the intention of the Yevonim? They wanted lahashkichom teirasecha ulahavirom mechuker ritzanecha. They wanted that Yidden should forget Torah and to take away Yidden from observing mitzvahs. So the decisions which we are making now, especially when these decisions are made in a Beis HaMedrash and in a Beis HaKnesses, when it's made in a shul. And as the Rebbe refers to the shul, to the shul of 770, which is the Beis HaMedrash of the Sidei Reinu. It's most opportune time to make such type of decisions which will be contrary to the concept what the Yevonim had in mind of doing. Our decisions will be such which will accomplish the opposite of this by spreading Chassidus and by being involved in Afotze and seeing to it that Chassidus reaches out to every single Jew, regardless of, even if at this point he's not familiar in Yiddish or in Lashon HaKodesh, and still Chassidus reaches out to him as well. This is what Yutas Kislev is all about. These are the type of decisions which we are to make at today's Farbrengen. As the Rebbe went on later in the second Sicher, the Rebbe again referred to the customs of the Rabbeim which are known to us. And one of them is regarding Chanukah Geld. Regarding Chanukah Geld, the Frierdiker Rebbe relates in his writings that it was a custom by the Tzemach Tzedek that the Tzemach Tzedek would give Chanukah Geld to all of his children and to his grandchildren, sons, daughters, son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. And this has been the custom by the Rabbeim later generations as well. Here the Rebbe says that the Frierdiker Rebbe also had a custom of giving Chanukah Geld to his children, and he also gave it to his son-in-laws. Not only did he give it to his daughters, but he gave it to his son-in-laws. The Rebbe says he's aware of that. Said it with a smile. And we see that the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that there was a specific night in Chanukah when the Chanukah Geld was given. Usually on the 5th Lichtel. And if it didn't work out on the 5th Lichtel, it would be on another evening of Chanukah. But we see that it is something which was practiced, and at the same time, when was the practice? The practice was once during Chanukah. And one of the evenings during Chanukah, that is when Chanukah Geld was given. Based on that, it is very hard to introduce an idea which should change this custom of giving Chanukah Geld once during Chanukah. But at the same time, the Rebbe continues, we are living now in a time which is, Rebbe uses an expression, mavhil. Mavhil means it's a tumult, in an unusual time. The Rebbe has an expression which he uses when he learns the Rashis. When he learns the Rashi and the Rebbe wants to stress a very strong question, the Rebbe uses the expression aklotz kashe. It's a very firm question. Here the Rebbe used the expression, it's klotz mavhil. It's so shocking. Klotz shocking the things which are going on in our generation. And he spoke out very much at length regarding to the situation of education in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe says that the chinuch, the education of children in Eretz Yisrael, is in the hands of Yidden. And it's in the hands of Yidden not only for the chinuch of the Jewish children in Eretz Yisrael, but even for the chinuch of the non-Jewish children. What do we see on the bottom line? The bottom line is that today there is a generation that grew up in Eretz Yisrael that is Asher lo yoda es Yosef, that does not know of Yosef. Every Yid has the title Yosef. Like there's a pasuk, Noiheg Chatzoin Yosef, which this pasuk refers to every Yid. Rebishter leads them like his sheep, Yosef, meaning that every Yid is one of the sheep of the Rebishter. And here a generation grew up, which this generation is totally unaware about the whole concept of Yosef Hashem li bein acher. In other words, not aware of the concept of being a child to the Rebishter, as totally strange from a proper Jewish education. To such an extent, the Rebbe says that it was spoken in a certain place regarding spreading Chassidus. So they were under the impression what is meant spread in Chassidus to come with an eschig and a lulav, to give them to bench eschig and lulav during the entire year. Here we see how strange and far they are pushed from knowing basic things of Yiddishkeit. It seems like this must have been a place which was approached where someone of Chabad may have went into with Daled Minim. Give them to bench on Esrig and a Lulav. And the party probably spoke about maintaining this contact throughout the entire year. So the people there were under the impression, what do we mean by maintaining this contact during the entire year? That during the entire year they should bench Esrig and Lulav. So this shows how far they are from Yiddishkeit. Which this is really a terrible situation. And the Rebbe spoke about it with tremendous amount of agmas nefesh, what the education in Eretz Yisrael is up to today. And it criticized very strongly those that are responsible for it, and those that are active in the government, but at the same time, once they get Zahav, once they get gold, in other words, once they get funds, they are happy and they are satisfied, and they don't, even though this money could be going for building yeshivas, which is a positive thing. But at the same time, they share the responsibility about the other things which are also done with this money. And if the opposite of yeshivas and shuls are built, then it's simply a question of avodah zarah. Rebbe says, there was the Egel Hazav, there was the golden calf. Gold could be used for two things. Gold could be used either for the golden calf, excuse me, or gold could be used for Kedusha. And when gold is used for the golden calf, that means the people that are responsible for it are simply, the responsibility on them is for an Indian of Avodah Zarah. And here the Rebbe led from one subject into another, and led into how Eretz Yisrael, the people who are the leadership of the government, would be more than glad to return and give back to the Arabs parts of Eretz Yisrael, and they are begging that it should come to it, and it should happen, that parts of Eretz Yisrael should be taken back. And here the Rebbe referred to what has taken place a while ago, when a large number of terrorists were exchanged for several Yidden. Hundreds and hundreds of terrorists were exchanged for a very few Yidden. The Rebbe says we're not touching it from a halachic point. Perhaps from a point of halacha, could be that we have to consider the lives of a few Yidden, even though there are only a few, and release that many terrorists so that to be able to save the lives of a few Yidden. But the people that did it, they did not do it on the grounds of halacha. They did not do it on the basis of Shulchan Aruch. They did it for one simple reason, because they wanted to satisfy the goy. We are living in a time today when Rachmana litzlan Yidden are being killed in Eretz Yisrael, and leadership is turning their heads away so that they shouldn't have to catch those terrorists who are responsible for this, so they shouldn't run into a problem. What should we do with these terrorists? Because they want to stay away from giving these terrorists the proper punishment which they deserve. Memela, everything is overlooked, and lives of Yidden is put into danger, all because of one calculation in mind, because they think that they want to do things and act in a way which will satisfy the goy. And again, the Rebbe came back to how the proper education which children deserve in Eretz Yisrael is totally neglected. And therefore, the Rebbe says we have to do something to be able to get close to children. The nature of a child is, when a child receives something, when a child receives money, this creates a gift, money, this creates by the child a feeling of satisfaction. Therefore, the Rebbe introduced today, Farbrengen came out with an idea that Chanukah geld be given not only once during Chanukah, but Chanukah geld should be given every night of Chanukah. Children should receive Chanukah geld every night. The question arises now, the Rabbeim introduced to give Chanukah geld only one night during Chanukah. How are we going to handle both of these things? Rebbe says very simple. In order to do that, in other words, to comply with the introduction of with the matter that the Rabbeim introduced, that we give Chanukah Geld only once during Chanukah, and that specific night, which is the 5th Lichtel, and that night we will give either double or triple to what we've been giving the children every night of Chanukah. So Memela, again, they'll feel the specialty of that night, by the fact that on that night they are receiving double or triple of what they got during the regular nights. And at the same time, this year we should introduce the minhag of giving Chanukah Geld to children every night during Chanukah. And naturally this brings about a warmth, and Rabbi used the expression which the Gemara uses regarding children, Yemin Mikareves. There's always a right hand which brings close. Which Gemara says it regarding children, that to a child the right arm should be extended, which brings closeness to the child. Rabbi also added on, this was a relatively long sikha where the Rebbe explained at length the problems in Eretz Yisrael, and at the same time suggested very strongly the fact that from this Chanukah, that being that we are before Chanukah, this is the Shabbos that gives bracha into Chanukah. We know the famous expression in the Zohar that Shabbos gives bracha into the entire week. My name is Borchen Kuli Yaimin, and this Shabbos gives bracha to Chanukah. Therefore, it's a proper time to discuss this inyan, that during this Chanukah, every child should receive Chanukah Geld not only once during Chanukah, but receive Chanukah Geld every single day of Chanukah. Then later in the Farbrengen, Rebbe continued learning Rashi's in this week's Sedre, as well as the Rambam, and also explaining commentary of his father on the Zohar in this week's Sedre. Regarding the Zohar, the Rebbe brought out a very interesting thing today. At the end of the Zohar in this week's Sedre, the Zohar talks about the changes which will take place in the world before the coming of Mashiach. Then at the end of the Sedre, there's a pasuk. Pasuk says, quotes a pasuk in Tehillim, Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen ve'amen. Blessed is Hashem eternally, la'olam, forever, amen ve'amen. Rabbi says this is a very strange thing. In a Zohar, after a Sedre, the Zohar should bring a pasuk. He doesn't explain the pasuk. It just printed a pasuk in the Zohar at the end of the Sedre. Rabbi says he looked and he searched and all the commentaries on the Zohar, and nobody explains this. To say that this is something which a printer, one of the printers who put in on his own, it's very hard. So if we look carefully, we will see that there's one more place in the Zohar where the same thing is found. And that is in the Zohar of Parshas Balak. Chumash Bamidbar. At the end of Parshas Balak, the Zohar also brings the pasuk, Baruch Hashem li'olam amen ve'amen. Something very strange. Throughout the entire Zohar, in two places, this pasuk is brought, and not that the Zohar explains something on the pasuk. It's just that after the Sedre, there's a line brought in with this pasuk. We may say there's a concept in Torah that we should be a Messiah b'toiv. Always try to finish with something good. And this is a good pasuk. Pasuk says, Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen v'amen. Gebencht is the Rebishter. Always amen v'amen. But again, as for Messiah b'toiv, if to say that this is the reason, why is it only in these two Sedras? Only here. And interestingly, Rebbe says in the commentaries of the Zohar that he has seen, he has not found any explanation on this. While talking about this inyan, Rebbe says today, if one wants to look up a pasuk and find if the pasuk is explained in the Zohar or words explained in the Zohar, the Rebbe says he doesn't have to be too knowledgeable. Doesn't require that he should be familiar in the entire Sefer of Zohar to know where a specific pasuk is discussed. Just like the same thing today, if we want to look up a pasuk where it's what is discussed in Medrash somewhere or in Gemara, it's also we don't have to be versed in all of Medrash or in all of Gemara to be able to find the pasuk. There's a sefer which is called Beis Aaron, and this sefer Beis Aaron goes according to psukim, and every pasuk he notes where in Medrash or where in Zohar or where in Gemara there's a reference to this pasuk. So we take the Beis Aaron and we look it up and we find. Not only that, the author of the Beis Aaron was the same author as of the Shar HaKoilel. In the back of the Siddur, which was in the back of the Machzor, which we all use on Rosh Hashanah, you'll notice there's a sefer called Shar HaKoilel. Shar HaKoilel is like various minhagim and halachas and so forth. And in the Siddur, which was reprinted now, in the Torah Oir Siddur, this is the Siddur that the Rebbe davens in the Torah Oir Siddur. This is Siddur Nusachari. But this was reprinted recently. In the back of the Torah Oir Siddur, they also put in the Shar HaKoilel, not only regarding Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, which we have for and every machzor, but for the entire year. By the way, the Beis Aaron is the same author as the Shar HaKoilel. He was a Zayda of the Rebbe. So in the Beis Aaron, he also refers to psukim where in Chassidus these psukim are explained. Lekutei Torah and Torah and other basic Chassidish Sfara. The Rebbe says, so today when we learn a pasuk Chumash, we should also have a desire that we should choose our pasuk. So a person has the liberty of choosing which pasuk he wants, but then choose a pasuk and look up in the Beis Aaron, and you will see where this pasuk is explained al pi Chassidus. So we will be able to learn the same pasuk, not only in the simple pshat of the pasuk, but we will be able to follow up the pasuk as the pasuk is explained in Chassidus. I've explained how the Beis Aaron, how he made the sefer. He had a lot of disciples around him, and he has, in those times, he didn't have a computer. So the Rebbe didn't say that. So in order to put together a sefer like that, he gave assignments to his talmidim. One he assigned one sedra, another one he assigned another sedra, and as they completed the sedras, then he gave each one a navi, then he gave each one other parts of Torah. So by doing that, the Beis Aaron, together with a group of his disciples, he carried the responsibility for it. He took it on his responsibility, but he gave the assignment to his students the way to put together the sefer. So Memela, if we want to look up where in the Zohar this pasuk Baruch Hashem Lo'ilam Amin V'Amin is explained, we could find it also through the Beis Aaron. And again, where is it? Only in two areas. At the end of Parshas Vayeshev and at the end of Parshas Bolak. And this is something which requires an explanation. It wasn't just put in there without any reason. So the Rebbe is learning as follows. He says, the Zohar at the end of Parshas Vayeshev is discussing how the world has to prepare itself before the coming of Mashiach. What will happen when Mashiach will come? This will be a time of the highest revelation of Getlichkeit, of godliness. That will be when Mashiach comes. So what do we say? Baruch Hashem, blessed is the Eibishter, and we use the same Hashem, not the Shem Elikim. We know there are various names, titles, how we can refer to the Eibishter. Two of the very popular ones is Hashem and Elikim. Elikim is Midas HaGvura, Midah of Din. However, Hashem is Chesed, kindness. So we say Baruch Hashem, blessed is the Eibishter, Li'olam eternally. And then we conclude Amen ve'amen. What is Amen ve'amen? The Gemara tells us, the Gemara says, Godel ha'oina Amen yoser mahamevorich. The one who responds Amen on a bracha has even a greater reward than the one that made the bracha. This means, it means that by saying Amen, we express that this bracha, what the Amen is recited on, is an inyan of eternity. It should remain that way. It should remain that way, nitzchias, eternal, forever. So what do we say here? Baruch Hashem, blessed should be the Eibishter, la'olam in this world. We know that the taich of olam is helen. World is a cover-up on godliness. Because in the world we don't see godliness as it is. It's covered up. However, what will happen when Mashiach will come? Then we will see Gettlichkeit in a way of Baruch Hashem, blessed is the Rebishter for revealing himself, la'olam, in this olam which originally was Lashon Helam, it was a cover-up on godliness. However, when Mashiach will come, Elokus will be revealed in this world, and we stress, Amen ve'amen. It should remain that way, constant, it should remain that way, la'olam v'od. So it's not stam that this pasuk was put in here because of Messiah and Betoiv, we want to finish with something good or something like it. It's the contents of this pasuk has a shayches to the inyan what the Zohar talks about here. Same the Rebbe says is regarding the Zohar. The Zohar and Parshas Balak is also the same. The Zohar and Parshas Balak there also talks about the coming of Mashiach. So that's why there also it's suitable to quote the pasuk of Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen v'amen. Here the Rebbe came back, if we will look in Tillim, where this pasuk is. It's the last pasuk of Kapitel Peites. Kapitel Tzadik begins the Yoim of Yutas Kislev. The Tillim which we say, according to the Shiurim of Chitas, on the day of Yutas Kislev, every day of the month we say different few Kapitel and Tillim. On the day of Yutas Kislev we say Tfilah L'Moshe. Tfilah L'Moshe begins with Kapitel Tzadik. What is the last pasuk of Kapitel Peites? Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen v'amen. In other words, that the whole inyan of Yutas Kislev, as the Rebbe keeps on saying, what's the whole inyan of Yutas Kislev? That's the inyan of spreading Chassidus. Spreading Chassidus, this is the Shiyafutzu Ma'inasecha Chutza, this will bring to the coming of Mashiach. So the pasuk before the Yom of Yutas Kislev concludes with Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen v'amen. If we will look into Tillim, we will also notice what is the pasuk before Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen v'amen. Anshe cherfu ikvos Mashiachecha. In other words, this is a pasuk which is talking about ikvos Mashiachecha, the steps of Mashiach, or as we would teach it in a deeper teich, ikvos ikvisa the Mashiach. Meaning the generation which we are in now, the problems which we are going through, which is in the generation of Ikvisa the Mashiach, Ikvisa the Mashiach, meaning we already hear the footsteps of Mashiach. It's already the final generation before the coming of Mashiach. And right after that pasuk of Hashacher fu Ikvis Mashiachecha, we have the pasuk of Baruch Hashem li'olam, amen v'amen. Why? Because this is a pasuk which has a very strong shaychus to the Giluyim, to the revelations which will be in the world when Mashiach will come. Regarding the Rashi, which the Rebbe explained in today's Sedre, the Rebbe raised two questions, which both of the questions are asked by the Ohr HaChaim. Feirish and Chumash, the Ohr HaChaim. And as the question is, the Ohr HaChaim asks these questions and gives an answer on them. Why is it that why is it that Rashi does not ask this question or neither answer the question? And it's both questions right away in the beginning of the Sedra. This week's Sedra begins with Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Megurei Oviv, that Yaakov settled land of his father be'eretz Canaan. So the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh asks a very simple question. The fact that Yaakov came back to Yitzchak, this we read about already in Parshas Vayishlach. And Parshas Vayishlach, before the Torah gets involved at the end of the Sedra telling us all about Esav's family, the pasuk says, Vayova Yankov al Yitzchak Aviv, Mamrei Kiryas Arba, Hi Chevron, Yankov came to Chevron. Where did he come to? The place, Asher Gor Sham Avram v'Yitzchak, to the place where Avram and Yitzchak live. So the pasuk says that already. So why does the pasuk here at the beginning of Vayeshev repeat Vayeshev Yaakov, that Yaakov settled in the land of his father? Obviously this was discussed already towards the end of Parshas Vayishlach. And Rashi doesn't comment anything on it. And this is an obvious question, which when we learn Chumash in the realm of Pshuta Shel Mikcha, this question should have arisen. Rabbi says no. Rashi does comment on it. Why? Because there's the long Rashi right at the beginning of the Sedra, What does Rashi tell us? Bikesh Yaakov Leishev Bishalva. Yaakov, long explanation, the first pasuk, second pasuk, that Yaakov wanted to sit in peace. Yaakov wanted to have some peace. So he had problems with Yosef. So right after the problem with Yosef began. In other words, what is Rashi trying to say by that? First, in Parshas Vayishlach, we learn that Yaakov returned to the home of his father Yitzchak. Here the Vayeshev is a different type of a Vayeshev, not the pshat that he returned. The fact that he returned to Yitzchak, this we learned about. Here the type of Vayeshev is, he is settling. Yaakov wants to settle. Yaakov wants to live a life of peace. And Itaka has these peaceful years until the problem with Yosef began. Memele, Rashi doesn't put it in a way of a question and an answer, but by what Rashi is telling us, this question is also understood. Why? Because Rashi is saying, Pshat, what is the meaning of Vayeshev Yaakov Beretz Megurei Aviv? Yaakov settled. It's not stam, he sat, he lived. Bikesh Yaakov Leishev Bishalva, as the expression would be, a hisyashvus, a permanent type of a residence without any interference. Kind of like Yaakov had enough problems until now. Had problems by love when he had to run away from Esav. Yaakov had a lot of problems, wanderings during his life, or at least where he wasn't safe, he wasn't permanent. Now Yaakov is coming to a point where Bikesh Yaakov Leishev Bishalva. Yaakov is looking at, he wants to live on a permanent basis, a permanent, quiet type of a life without interferences. So that is why the pasuk is repeating Vayeshev Yaakov. It's not to tell us that he returned to the residence, to the area where Yitzchak lived, that the pasuk is out to stress, Bikesh Yaakov Leishev Bishalva. Yaakov wanted to sit in peace, and Kafat Salav Rugzei Shal Yosef. Then we go on to the second pasuk. Second pasuk begins, Eila Toldis Yaakov. This is the Toldis story of Yaakov, and right away goes on to Yosef ben Shvayes Rishana. Yosef was a 17-year-old. Hayeroya es Echav Batzoin. He was a shepherd, together with his brothers and the sheep. And also, he was especially close, he was very close to the children of Bilah and Zilpah. So the Chaim HaKadosh asks, quoting, it would have been better if the pasuk would have used the expression, Hayaroye Batzoin, he was a shepherd of sheep, Es Echav, together with his brothers. The grammar of the pasuk would have sounded better that way. Furthermore, he wasn't a shepherd of his own sheep. Es Echav Batzoin. It's not his own tzoin. It's the sheep of his brother, or the sheep that belonged to Yaakov, or it belonged to the brothers, or it belonged to Yaakov. So the Batzoin should have been together with Roye. Roye, he was a shepherd, Batzoin in the sheep, as Echav, together with his brothers. So here the Rebbe learns this is no question that Rashi should be concerned about it. Why? Because actually the question arises, the pasuk is discussing Eila Toldis Yaakov. This is the story of Yaakov, and goes on telling us about Yosef. Why does the pasuk tell us Bechlal that Yosef was a shepherd? Of what importance is it to know that Yosef was a roya, that Yosef was a shepherd? The reason for this, because the pasuk goes on, and the pasuk tells us that Yaakov took his son Yosef and told him, go see how your brothers are doing, and go see how the sheep are doing. So until now we are under the impression that Yosef, who was the son of Yaakov, and Yaakov shared his knowledge in Torah, he shared it with Yosef. So Yosef was only all that Yosef knew was Torah. So if Yosef knew Torah, and he excelled in Torah, what shaykhs did Yosef have to go and check out what's the condition of the sheep, how the brothers are in charge of the sheep? So that's why the pasuk is telling us you should know that together with all of his qualifications, Yosef was also a raya, he was also a shepherd. And he was it. And the Rebbe is learning that a kind of, whom was he a shepherd with? He was a shepherd with his brothers. He was a shepherd with his brothers. Therefore, when Yaakov wanted to know how the brothers are and how the sheep are, he wanted to know what's doing, how they're getting along in Dyson, taking care of the sheep. It was it fit into line that he would choose Yosef and send Yosef, that Yosef should find out what's going on. But the Rebbe is learning, this is what he stressed, that the Hoyaroyes Echav, the fact that he was a shepherd, especially Batzoin and the sheep, kind of like these words in the Pasuk are like in parentheses. This is not the main thing which the Pasuk is out to tell us. It's a Maimar HaMuzga, parentheses. Pasuk is mentioning that we should know what shaykhs did Yosef have to go on such a mission. So the Pasuk is stressing that Hoyaroyes Echav Batzoin. He was also together with his brothers and the sheep. But it's not that the Torah is getting involved to tell us that Yosef was a shepherd. Maybe you have a question that the wording in the pasuk should be different because he wasn't the shepherd of his own sheep, he was a shepherd of his brother's sheep, and so forth. This is not what the pasuk is out to tell us. The pasuk is just mentioning derech agav in a very bypassing way, as if these words would be in parentheses, that Yosef was a roye, and that is why Yaakov sent him, even though Yosef's main inyan was Torah, and Yaakov put all the knowledge of Torah which he himself had, he shared it with Yosef and wanted that Yosef should excel in Torah. But at the same time, Yosef was also a shepherd, and therefore he was capable of going on such a mission. The Farbrengen, the Rebbe also, before we continue, throughout the entire Farbrengen, Rebbe keeps on stressing how this year is a special year. Besides the fact that it's the year of Hakel, it is in today's Farbrengen, I think it began already in last week's Farbrengen, last Shabbos, that the Rebbe stresses, we know that the Rebbe, from the beginning of the year, keeps on stressing the importance of this year, that this year is a year of Tismach, a year of happiness, Simcha. Now the Rebbe is introducing a step further. He says it could be read as Tismach, it could also be read as Tisamach. What is the difference? Tismach means every one of us has to be happy. Tisamach is more than that. We have to take this happiness and bring it out into other people, to bring simcha, to bring joy into others. It's throughout the entire Farbrengen, and every sicha, every inyan that the Rebbe keeps on stressing, everything which the Rebbe demands from us, he says, but this year, it's particularly so that we have to do all this thing, all of these inyanim, because we are now in a year of tismach, we're in a year of tisamach. We have to be happy ourselves, and we have to bring happiness to others. Naturally, how do we bring proper happiness? Proper happiness is by fulfilling all of these inyanim which the Rebbe discusses. Regarding the Shir and Rambam, it's the halachas of edus, of witness, and the Rambam explains that there are differences between witness and a bezdin, and a court, Jewish court. The Rambam explains that a bezdin requires a mokoim, a special set place where they should sit and handle their cases. Why? Because in order for Bezdin to come out with a proper decision, Bezdin has to have when can one produce a proper decision and come out with a proper opinion? This is when his Gashmi is the Kasid setting is also inconvenience. When a person sits a set aside room, and it's a convenient room, and this is where the Bezdin of three people even, or the Bezdin of the three sit, and this is where they handle their questions, it makes it easier on them to come out with a proper decision. Naturally, we always find that the Gashmis, the environment, affects the mind of a person, affects the operation of a person, how a person functions. Therefore, for a Bezdin, this is needed. For Eides, for witness, there's no need to give them such type of a setting, because after all, what does a witness do? A witness relates what has happened. So he told us what happened, and once he told us what happened, he's finished with saying what he did. He's accomplished. He's done what he was supposed to. However, regarding a bezdin needs this type of a setting. Rabbi raised the question: how would it be al pi halacha, even for a goyish bezdin? Because we know by goyim there is also a need of a bezdin. Because amongst the Sheva mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, one of the mitzvahs is also dinim, that by Goyim there's supposed to be rules and regulations. Memela, to have rules and regulations, we have to have people to implement them. And that is a Bezdin. So Memela, these halachas that the Rambam tells us, that the conveniences in a set up permanent place where a Bezdin functions out of, that this applies to a Bezdin, so the question arises, that this apply to a Goyish Bezdin as well? Talking about this inyan, that a Ben Noyach, Goyim are also obligated to dinim, rules and regulations and so forth. The Rebbe mentioned with this is how Mefarshim explain why Shimon and Levi, the entire incident with the city of Shechem. That Shimon and Levi went and killed Shechem. All the residents of Shechem. After they started up with Dinah. And Yaakov originally resented that. Yaakov criticized them for doing that. So it's explained in Svarim what was the reason of Shimon and Levi. Why did they do it? Because Shimon and Levi saw that what is going on in the city of Shechem, that there is no dinim going on there. There's no control. There's no control in Shechem. Memela, we know that by a Ben Noyach al pi halacha, if a Ben Noyach transgresses any of his Sheva mitzvahs, al pi halacha he's chayiv misa. Memela, when they realized the hefkeres, what's going on in Shechem, so that is why they gave him their punishment, which was misa. Yaakov, on the other hand, was afraid. When could we do it? When the Yid's hand is powerful, when it's Yodei Al Yaina. However, if a Yid is in danger, then there's no halacha that tells us that the Yid is supposed to put himself into sakona, put himself into danger, to see that the Bnei Noach are fulfilling their mitzvahs. Yaakov felt that perhaps this may have an effect, that their lives may be put in danger as a result of his children Shimon and Levi killing the city of Shechem. That is why Yaakov told them that they shouldn't have done it. However, Shimon and Levi, who felt confident that nothing will happen, they did it because they saw Bnei Noach who are not fulfilling the halachas, the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, of which one of them is dinim. Rebbe always explains every inyan in Ruchni is spiritually. Spiritually, there's also every Yid is in 2 madregas. There is a Yid, how he's in the position of an aid, he's in the position of a witness. There's a pasuk, Atem Eidai. The Rebbe says, you people, you Yidden are my witness. What does it mean? That Yidden are witness for the existence of the Rebbe. Yidden bring out the idea that there's a Rebbe in existence. That's one level. However, there is a higher level. What is the higher level? How Yidden are put into a position of a Bezdin. What does that mean? A Bezdin, when a Jewish court handles a matter, Pshat is that they create that so and so should be. Question comes before them, and there's a doubt. They straighten out the matter, and the way they straighten out the matter, this is how it remains. In other words, they create. His expression would be, they create mitzias. They could create conditions, create situations as an outcome of this and this question. Bezdin says such and such will be the ruling. What does this mean? How a Yid is in a position, how a Yid is in a level of bringing Getlichkeit into this world. In other words, not only is our existence a witness for the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but a Yid is doing more than that. A Yid is bringing Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know that the Rebishter's desire was to make this world a dwelling place for the Rebishter. So this is what a Yid does. A Yid he's bringing in, he's creating. What do we mean he's creating? He's introducing Getlichkeit into this world. This is why each and every one of us was created, to bring Getlichkeit into the world. So here a Yid is similar not only to a witness, but a Yid is similar to a Bezdin. And the Rebbe is getting from Inyan to Inyan. I spoke that it's already the furthest point that the Rebbe should take us all out of Golos. Yidden are constantly screaming, Ad Mosai, how much longer will we be in Golos? And as the Gemara says, Kfar kolu kol hakitzin. A kitz means a time, a date for the coming of Mashiach. All the dates have already passed. And the Rebbe should not postpone it any longer and should bring Mashiach right away. There's no inyan in postponing. There's a pasuk Imoy anoichi b'tzara. But the Rebbe says he's with every yid in his tzaras and his problems. The Rebbe says it's already the highest point that it should not be Imoy anoichi b'tzara. Let it be Imoy anoichi b'geula. Let the Rebbe be together with Yidden, but not in tzaras anymore. Let the Rebbe be together with Yidden in geula. Let it be, as we say in davening, Haderes ve'emunah l'chaye elamim, habina v'habracha. These are all praises of the beauty of the Rebbe. And let all of these praises be brought down into reality, that we should all be able to vision all these praises. When will we be able to see how Haderes ve'emunah l'chaye elamim, from the Aleph until the Tov, Hatehillah v'Tiferes, the praise is all to the Rebbe, l'chaye elamim. When we'll be able to envision all this will be all be able to envision this when Mashiach will come. So when the Rebbe was talking here at the very end of the Farbrengen about the Haderes ve'emunah l'chaye elamim, habina v'habracha l'chaye elamim, all these brachas to the Rebbe, and amongst them we say hakriya v'hakdusha l'chaye elamim, reading and holiness also l'chaye elamim to the Rebbe. Here the Rebbe referred, when the previous Rebbe, when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived here in the United States, a short while after his arrival, he was responsible, he set up for a journal to be published, and the name of this journal was Hakriya v'Hakdusha, Reading and Holiness. Half of it was in Yiddish and in Hebrew, and the other half of it was in English. The main subject which was discussed in Hakriya v'Hakdusha was published primarily through the years of the Second World War. The main subject which was stressed in each and every issue of Hakriya v'Hakdusha was a model also which was introduced by the Frierdiker Rebbe, la'alter le'tshuva, la'alter le'gula. Immediately we will do tshuva, and this will bring to immediate giyula. So, the Rebbe was talking today about the Haderes, on this subject of Haderes ve'emunah l'chaye elamim. When he came to the end, he says, and we say Hakriya v'Hakdusha l'chaye elamim, reading and holiness to whom l'chaye elamim, to the Rebbe. So now that we have also gone through that Frierdiker Rebbe has published this publication of Hakriya v'Hakdusha, and what is the contents of Hakriya v'Hakdusha, also calling that we should prepare ourselves to Mashiach, Yidden do tshuva, and this is a halach in the Rambam. The Rambam paskins, if Yisrael oisin tshuva, when Yidden will do tshuva, miyad heine golen, this will bring immediately to Geula. So Mamela, this Hakriya v'Hakdusha l'chaye elamim, which Hakriya v'Hakdusha discusses the inyan, also the inyan of Geula, the inyan of preparing ourselves for the coming of Mashiach, la'alta l'tshuva, la'alta l'geula. Remember, this will lead to it, that by the coming of Mashiach, all of these inyanim, that then we will have the Rebbe with us, but in a way of imei anoichi b'geula, the Rebbe together with every Yid, united with every Yid, together with every Yid, but no longer chas v'shalom and tzara. The Rebbe will be with us in geula. And by the Rebbe being with us in Giyula, this is, again, the Rebbe spoke, this is something which every Yid has to hope for the coming of Mashiach, not like those that say that we are not ready for Giyula, we are not ready for Mashiach, we were that many years in Galus, we could stay longer in Galus. Definitely not so. We are hoping that Mashiach should come immediately. In the Raive der Raiven. Raive der Raiven is the time of Shalosh Shudas, is called Raive der Raiven. It's a very time of Shabbos, is in general an Eis Rotzai, special desirable time, and particularly the time of Mincha. That is why you will notice we say, before we take out the Sefer Torah, Shabbos before Mincha, we say a line before Brich Shemei, Vanis Filosi Lacha Hashem Eis Rotzai. It is a time, a desirable time. When is this desirable time? Shabbos by Mincha. In Aramaic it's called Rava de Raiven, a wish of all wishes. Yehi Rava, Rotzai, in Hebrew means the same as Rava, a wish, a desire, in Aramaic. So this time is a special time. It's called Raiva de Raiven, the most time of an Eis Rotzai. So the Rebbe concluded, let it be that in this Eis Rotzai, let Mashiach come and take us out of Galus, and as the Rebbe always concludes, v'lo ikvam, and not to hold us up, even keheref ayin, not even to hold us up, a moment, a second, not even to hold us up, with the blink of an eye. A good